It takes a real man to tackle the hot issues that really matter.
Michael Hart is the man of this house.
Welcome to the Michael Hart Show.
Hello, you're listening to the Michael Hart Show right here on the Heart of America Talk Radio Network. It is the 22nd day of February, and we're locked and loaded today as we got our good buddy Dan Wos, author of Good Gun, Bad Guy, joining us today. It has been a rather feisty news week as, of course, the big story of the week has been the hoax perpetrated by Empire star Jussie Smollett. And guess what? We're going to do everything in our power to avoid that story today. We've also got more racial tension as the Tennessee governor, Bill Lee, says he regrets wearing a Confederate uniform in college, and also reparations. Democrats running off at the mouth about something that they cannot provide and that, frankly, they should not provide, and that the argument can even be made has already been provided. But yet again, for people that are not up to speed on the facts and reality, it certainly does sound like a good campaign slogan. A lot to talk about today. We'll also take your calls at 929-477-3761. Been a very hectic week and a lot going on. Had an opportunity to hang out with Joe Lockett over at the Outspoken, for those of you that are local to this market where we broadcast to you live in central Alabama. So I had the opportunity to do that. Moments before I was going live with Joe, I actually got a call from a talk radio program that was live out of London, England, that asked me if I could give a few insights onto a interview that I did a few years back with former Monkey Peter Tork. And so here I'm sitting in one studio doing an interview with another studio. And so such is life in the ever-changing, fast-paced world of news media. But a lot of fun. So a lot of things going on this week, and also hanging out with our good buddy Amy Fuller over at America Trends, and just can't even keep up with all the things we've been doing here lately. So we appreciate your support, and we appreciate you supporting the good folks over at Liberty One Tech. That's Liberty, the number one, tech.com for all your computer and technological support needs. Go check them out. And remember that Heart of America is brought to you in part by the Unknown America Project. Go check that out. The book is available at theunknownamerica.com, theunknownamerica.com. Support the program any way that you are able to as we continue to spread the Christian conservative, sensical message of what is going on in this country today. And there is an awful lot to talk about as we have potheads running for president. We got vegans running for president. We have got Indians running for president. If you can't see through all the smoke and the mist out there, folks, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, I have been preaching it for 10 years now. If you can't see what's going on in this country today, then my words are unfortunately going to fall painfully short of convincing you otherwise. One of the things that has always been on our radar, it is what's going on in our constitutional rights, with a very special emphasis on the First and Second Amendment. And to give us a little bit of an idea of what he's been grappling with over the course of the last several weeks since we have spoken to him, we've got Dan Wos, author of Good Gun, Bad Guy, joining us, calling us in from the beautiful, although somewhat misguided state of New York. And we welcome Dan into this edition of the Michael Hart Show. Hello, Dan. How are you?
Hey, Michael. Yes, I am from New York, but don't hold that against me.
Well, my family is as well, so it's all good. Dan, you post an awful lot of stuff, on social media. You tag me in it a lot, and I see some of the things that you are dealing with out there on the front lines of the gun debate. I know there's something going on at a school in New York that you had posted here lately. What kind of battles are you seeing? Particularly as we get more and more and more into the presidential campaign season, the wackiness seems to really be accelerating. Now you got Kamala Harris, suggesting that because she was a stoned Jamaican that she should be voted for president. You've got Elizabeth Warren running around doubling, tripling, and quadrupling down on her Native American heritage. Cory Booker, talking about how he's a vegan and hates hamburger meats and cheese and eggs and bacon, et cetera, et cetera. The craziness is getting really crazy, and I can only imagine how crazy it is in the gun world.
Oh, yeah, it definitely is. I mean, we'll have mostly attacks on the Second Amendment from all different parts of the country, all different people. I'll give you a couple instances, but then there is some good news too. There's little pockets of good news as well. But one thing that was really kind of disturbing is Jillian Gilchrist. She's a state representative for Connecticut. She proposed a bill called HB 5700, which would increase the tax on ammo to 50%. 50% of the cost of the ammo. So sometimes I think people were misunderstanding it. They thought it was a 50% tax increase. That would be like if you're paying 7%, now you're paying 10.5%. No, it's not like that. It's 50% of the cost of the ammo. And a box of ammo can be expensive for some people, and it might limit their ability to practice. Might limit their ability just to have ammo on hand in case they need it. So, dangerous thing. It affects people who can't afford it. Ultimately the black market that would be created by a law like that would not affect the criminals, the people who don't pay attention to that stuff anyway. So that was just one. That's one of many. But there's some good stuff too. There's New Mexico, Quay County. Decided to deem themselves a Second Amendment sanctuary. Kind of cool. 10,000 citizens, a small part of the small little piece of New Mexico. But the idea there was the sheriff's department had enough of all the gun restrictions, and they decided that they're going to be a Second Amendment sanctuary. So mostly bad, but some good.
We are obviously, and it's a little bit early, it's like everybody always jokes that Christmas comes earlier and earlier every year, and certainly campaign seasons seem to come earlier and earlier every year, and we are definitely in the midst of this one, and it seems like every other day another Democrat comes out and they are going to run for office, and on some of the craziest platforms that you'll ever hear, Dan. And I'm curious, as you roam around, which of these candidates from the gun restriction perspective has caught your eye the most? Because I'll tell you, at this point, we haven't been hearing a whole lot. It's mostly a matter of who can line up quick enough to give away enough fast enough. Now, there is a report that came out from yesterday about Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris talking about, why they embrace the idea of reparations for black Americans. And every single campaign season, this one gets dusted off. And it is so, I find it sad that there are people out there that are gullible and naive enough to fall for what is obviously a very obvious political ploy. But with that said, there has not been a whole lot of chatter about the restrictions on gun ownership as of this point. What are you hearing that perhaps I'm not?
Well, I think one of the things is that they are using this stuff for campaign purposes. So this, any type of gun restriction appeals to the people who they've already previously scared the hell out of about guns. So what they've done is they've done their legwork up to this point by scaring Democrat voters about guns and teaching them to hate gun owners because they now believe gun owners are recklessly and intentionally putting everyone in danger. That's been part of the brainwashing to set up the Democrat voters. Now these presidential candidates will come forward and start to use gun restrictions as leverage to further solidify the vote. That's the way I see it, and I saw it very clearly in Kamala Harris's town hall. I don't know if I'm sure people have watched that. She did this town hall right after she announced that she was running, and she used every strategy and tactic that I talk about in Good Gun, Bad Guy. All the strategies to capture the audience and scare them, and it was so over the top that she even brought in a pastor with a scripted question. He asked the question, and the question perfectly set her up so she could go on her anti-gun rant. and bring in all the visuals and all the demonization of gun owners. And so the whole thing, the gun section of her town hall was very interesting to me. It showed me the strategies and tactics and the immoral way that these Democrats will trick their voters. So what I did was I analyzed that. What I do is I do these things called Dan Wos Destroys. And I did a Dan Wos Destroys Kamala's Gun Grab. And what it is I basically verbally narrated her gun portion of her speech, and picked out all the strategies, terminology, and all the tricks that her and her fake question person was doing. So it's pretty interesting if people want to see it. It's called Dan Wos Destroys Kamala's Gun Grab, and it's on YouTube. But it will give you an insight of what exactly they do to fool people who either can't critically think very well or who just don't pay attention.
You know, it's interesting that you bring that up because it's not just a matter of guns. It's really and truly a matter of pretty much everything. And,
yeah.
you know, I mean, it really is from the left. You know, the healthcare argument and the racial strife argument, the border argument. I mean, all of their arguments, they're absolutely fraught with lies, and a lot of them are unachievable. And again, back to this reparations thing that comes up every 4 years. And one of the things that's always concerned me, Dan, isn't so much what politicians say, but how gullible the voters are to accept it at face value. You know, the entire argument, for example, of reparations is so misguided, it's mind-numbing because, first and foremost, the majority of African Americans in this country are not direct descendants of slaves, at least not ones that were held in captivity. They might have been descendants of blacks from that period of time, but not slaves held in captivity. And I can keep this up all day long. You know, and the fact of the matter is it was something which was, you know, illegal practice at that time. And I'm not even going to get into the aspect of who do you pay, how much do you pay, how long do you pay it. You know, you pay this generation, do you owe money to the next generation? Why has your grandmother not been paid reparations? You know, do you need to, if you receive reparations, do you need to forfeit that to your Oh, yeah. Oh, I've got it all mapped out. The thing about it is, okay, so you paid reparations, for example, to this generation. Well, what about the next generation, the next generation, the next generation, et cetera, et cetera? You know, the majority of Americans in this country during the slaveholding years not only did not own a slave, they did not even know people that owned slaves. That was like less than 3% of the total population. But that's beside the point. And I'm not belittling the practice. It was absolutely horrific for those that went through it. But the point is this, that politicians will bring up these emotionally charged issues that are not definable. They're not implementable. To malaprop on it, you can't implement them. You can't define them. There's no money for them, et cetera, and it's just words, as you point out, for the purposes of scaring the ever-living bahoo out of people to elicit an emotion to get them to the polls to vote for the very things that they can't provide. It's stunning in its brilliance.
Yeah, well, it is brilliant, and here's the difference between, you know, you talked about the racial one, and I think that Democrats really are running on a whole hodgepodge of causes. They have these causes, you know, they have their anti-gun cause, they'll have their fake racism cause, and I call it fake because the majority of it is fake. Racism does not exist in this country at any level near what they want you to think it is. And so I call it fake racism, the fake sexism stuff. You know, the accusations that they make with respect to these causes are outlandish. I mean, they're crazy. They're absolutely outrageous in size and scope relative to the actual thing, the actual problem that we have. So what they do is they'll use these causes, and when a cause doesn't bring the power and the fear and the anger that they need, they perpetuate it more, which is what I know you don't want to talk about, that jackass Smollett or whatever his name is. But that's exactly what he was doing. He was perpetuating it even more than it actually was or is. So they need their causes. My final point here is they need their causes because that's what they run on. Whereas, Republicans, they really don't run on causes. They run on values. They run on constitutional rights. They run on the economy. They'll run on things that are more substantial and important to us. So that's the difference. And when you take away one of those causes, for instance, if black people and white people were to get along perfectly in this world and you didn't see any signs of racism, it wouldn't help the Democrats. So
you're right about that.
Right. So when things are going well, they need to perpetuate more of it to make people angry so that people will vote for the Democrats who promise to rid the world of this terrible racism.
And so you really see a lot of that in the overlay of the gun argument. And what's funny to me, and you and I have talked about this on the air and off, what is so funny to me is how the arguments that they level are the exact same arguments regardless of what they're trying to achieve or accomplish. And, everything is just like this. If you go to Drudge today, there's a picture of this Jussie Smollett, or however he pronounces his name, at, above the fold, so to speak, wearing a T-shirt with an American flag on it that all just says F-word Donald. And the fear and the consternation and the desperation and despair that they have been able to gin up against this president when just 4 or 5 years ago, Donald Trump was the absolute darling of the Democrat Party is amazing to me. And it makes me wonder if anybody within the party, anybody within the ranks of the Jussie Smolletts of the world, are they illiterate? Do they know how to read? I can't tell you the arguments that I've gotten into since I've written my book, Unknown America, that I've gotten into with people over history. And I'm like, you do realize that this is like history and stuff like that. Like I can't make it up. Like it's provable. Like I got my information from the Smithsonian Institute as well as the United States government and not your tabloid history books. I got into an argument some months ago. I was making this point about the fact that, Rosa Parks was not the first woman not to give up a bus seat in Montgomery, Alabama. And these kids got all offended, and they were calling me every name in the book. And all of a sudden I flashed on the screen the front page of the Montgomery Advertiser 8 months before Rosa Parks didn't give up her bus seat about the woman that really did, that history ignored, and from the 50s. And all of a sudden the mouths drop open, and they don't. But at this point in time, this is where it gets weird.
Well, they don't know.
But the thing is, Dan, is that once I had proven the point, and I mean proven it, they didn't want to hear anything else.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm seeing in the gun debate. They are so fearful, and I really do believe this in my heart, that if you change a mind on the gun debate issue, they are fearful of what else they have wrong. And that's a big pill to swallow.
Yeah, you just nailed it, because what this really comes down to is that they've been convinced for so long that they are, well, first of all, they're convinced that they're smarter than everyone else, and they're more, moral. They have higher moral standards than everybody else. They're convinced this stuff. It's a form of brainwashing, and it's been done to them for decades. So now, what would it mean about them as a person? You take any individual leftist. What would it mean about them as an individual if they had to admit that they were wrong all this time? They can't do it because now the leverage on their psychology is so strong that they can't turn back, because it means that they have been wrong and that maybe they're not as smart as they thought they were, or maybe they haven't been acting with morals. So they can't do it. And that's the way it's been set up. It locks them in so to speak. And Democrats have done this, and the way that they've created Trump hate, you got to give them credit. They've been successful at it because the left really hates Trump. And with this dirtbag Smollett, nobody's talking about what caused him to set up such a charade. What caused that anger in him to want to lash out and go to all these extensive measures to demonize Trump and his supporters? What would cause that in his mind? Can you imagine the thoughts that are happening in his head on a daily basis to make him actually go out and do something like this? It's pure hatred and pure belief that he is right. So that's the scary thing. So it's a brainwashing of sorts, and he fell for it, and he'll never be able to see the truth because he's locked right in.
Well, it's a very good point, and it's one that causes me a little bit of despair because I don't know how best to say this, so I'll just say it. There's a level of frustration, and I think you probably experience this too, but there's a level of frustration that I experience when I am dealing with subject matters such as this, such as what was in the book, etc., where the proof is so positive, it's so obvious, it's so overwhelming, but yet people still cannot accept it. And I struggle because I am not smart enough, Dan. I am not intellectual enough to help them move past their phobias when exactly what you and I are talking about, where you have these people out there that are so mired in their hatred, so mired in beliefs that are so misguided that, it becomes frustrating that you can't turn them, so to speak, despite the overwhelming preponderance of proof and facts and evidence and history and truth. And it's very frustrating. And I know that it's very frustrating on the gun debate. We did a report, I don't know, a month or so ago. It was something like, less than 3% of the guns that were ever used in the commission of a crime in this country were purchased legally. And the total number of people in this country that own a gun versus the total number of people that ever use a gun in a crime are so infinitesimally small as to be mind-boggling. And the report that came out a couple of years ago that more crimes are committed with claw hammers than with pistols. Yeah. I mean, it just goes on and on, but they just don't want to have anything to do with it, and that just frustrates me to no end.
Well, and here's the thing, like I said, they're locked into that position because it would mean something bad about them if they were wrong. So what they do at that point is they seek out data, statistics, information that supports their position. And there's a whole wealth of it out there. There's a whole wealth of left-leaning gun statistics, whatever cause you're talking about, there are statistics out there that are fake, that are not true. So these people who are already have been cultivated into this mindset, this ideology, they're seeking out that stuff, and it's there for them. So many times I'll get into debates and conversations with people, and they will show me statistics that prove their point. And I'm going, man, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then when you dig deeper, you find out that it's some Bloomberg-funded study or something from, Huffington Post or something like that, and because it's fake. So the point is, there are statistics out there that support any argument that they want, but they're not true. I always tell them, I say, let's go to FBI statistics. Let's even go to CDC, as biased as they have been. Let's go to these organizations that we can trust, because they wouldn't want me presenting statistics from an NRA study, for instance. So I don't want to see their study. Not that NRA would ever say anything wrong. I totally believe the statistics and the studies that NRA does, but they wouldn't believe it. So I don't want to see anything that comes from Huffington Post and has been verified by Snopes. This is the ridiculous. Right. But the truth is, they're convinced of it because of that stuff. So they have a whole system going.
Yeah, it really is quite amazing and quite frustrating at the same time. And I think that's one of the reasons that it allows these politicians to essentially say anything in a campaign or
Yeah.
It's like the other day that this Van Jones came out, and I think it was Jackie Robinson that he compared this Jussie Smollett to, and the fact that Smollett was the fall of an icon. He was a civil rights icon, despite the fact that the gay argument has nothing to do with the African American civil rights movement, but he sure as hell co-opted it for the moment. And there are people out there just shaking their head, going, that's right. That's the way it is. And I'm just going, oh my God, you're so stupid. Some of these people are so stupid. I wonder how they survive childbirth. And no, I'm being serious, and it's sad. It is so unbelievably sad to me because if you can't accept facts in the face of facts, in the face of the truth, then there's let's get beyond the physicalities of the slaveholding practice and get into mental slaveholding, because that's really and truly what it is. And
sure,
I know that you, in your world, because you do so much more of the gun debate work than I do, it must be overwhelmingly frustrated to be in those situations where it's almost impossible to make an argument against people that are not going to accept it. But with that said, since you are the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy and Good Gun, Bad Guy 2, and I want to take a break here in just a moment. I'm hoping you can hold on for me for another segment or so. But before we do take a break, I'd like for you to tell the listeners a little bit more about some of the more inane arguments that you hear from the gun-hating left.
Before or after the break?
Right now.
Okay. Well, a lot of the stuff, it's so irrational, some of the things that they talk about. Their terminology, for one, is just the most interesting thing. They'll take a term like let's use gun violence, and people have believed that there is such a thing as gun violence, and it baffles me to think that they can actually believe that if you take away guns, people will not want to do bad things. And so that's part of it. But it's the gun. There's no such thing as gun violence. I say it all the time. It's human violence. And what I've done is I get down underneath their terms and underneath their rhetoric, and I start to look at more like the psychology behind all of it. But that's one of the things that they'll do. They'll use terminology in a way that that people don't recognize. Wild West. You say Wild West to an anti-gunner, and they instantly think that everybody with a handgun is running around creating havoc in the grocery store, road rage. They're shooting people, and they believe that they need to stop gun ownership because of recklessness. And there's no such thing. It just doesn't happen, but they believe it. So that's the argument. That's the type of stuff that they present to people who aren't paying attention, and that's the stuff that I dig into and dissect and try to help people understand what's actually being done to society. Because once we understand what's being done to these leftists, these anti-gunners, then we'll be able to manage them a little bit better.
Well, hopefully we'll definitely be able to encourage them to understand the realities and vote along lines that are protections for them, because as you and I have discussed many times before, and I've heard other people say it, so I won't accept it. I won't put it out there as though it's my own. But the Second Amendment protects the First Amendment, and the First Amendment protects all the others. And if we lose sight of that, this stupid argument, why do you have to have an AR to go hunting? Why do you have to have an AR?
Well,
right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, but I interrupted you. But that's another perfect point. If you don't mind, let me just address that real quick.
Go ahead.
Nobody needs an AR-15. That's the line that they use all the time. Nobody needs an AR-15. But if you look at that statement and you look at that word need is in there because they don't understand the difference between a right and a need, or a right and a privilege, as I usually say. Everybody on the anti-gun side believes that if you don't need it, you shouldn't have it. So what brings us to a huge problem, because let's imagine for a minute that gun ownership was measured by some metric of need. Who would determine that? Who would determine whether or not Dan Wos or Michael Hart needed a gun? It certainly wouldn't be someone from the NRA or Gun Owners of America.
Right.
It would be some leftist politician. And you can bet that if you were to use your gun and to save your life or the life of your family, you can bet there'd be a whole line of lawyers lined up to fight against you to say that you didn't need that gun to do it. You could have used a hammer, you could have ran, you could have hidden a closet, you could have used a 9-iron, whatever.
The argument on its surface is so unbelievably weak. No woman needs 25 pairs of shoes. The average American doesn't need a boat. Most people don't need 3 cars in the driveway. Most people don't need, 5 business suits or 10 business suits. Need, you're right. Need is a very, very interesting word when you break it down. Most people don't even need a car. You make the argument, then I'd have to walk to work. Well, then you'd have to walk to work. But you know what? If you didn't have the cars on the road, guess what we do away with? We do away with auto accidents and death in automobile accidents. We do away with drunk drivers. We could if we took away the need, because you don't need those things. Isn't it interesting that almost everything in life that harms us is usually harmed by something that we perceive that we need? In other words, a car or a boat accident or whatever the case may be. So the argument is extremely valid, and they can't see that.
Well, and if you ask an anti-gunner, so if nobody needs an AR-15, what guns do people need? And you get to their truth, and their truth is they don't think anybody needs any type of gun. I don't need 500 horsepower in my Corvette. I could look like a doofus and drive around in a Prius, but I choose not to. I have the right to do that. I have the right to own a gun, and it's not a matter of need, and nobody is supposed to be determining whether or not I can have that gun, whether I need it or not. So the whole need thing is a smokescreen to try to push people off the concept of the Bill of Rights. It seems to me that it's a way of pushing them to disregard the word right. It's not the Bill of Needs, and people don't see that, though.
No, they don't. Hey, Dan, can you hold on for another segment or so? I got to pay a couple really quick bills.
Sure thing.
Excellent. We're having a conversation with Dan Wos. He's the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy. He's going to join us on the other side and give us a few more insights into the way the anti-gunners work. You're listening to The Michael Hart Show. Hey, welcome back. We're having a conversation with Dan Wos, the author of A Good Gun, Bad Guy. He joins us on this Friday edition of The Michael Hart Show right here on the Heart of America Talk Radio Network. Dan, before we get back to it, tell the listeners where they can pick up a copy of both your books.
Oh, they can go to goodgunbadguy.net or goodgunbadguy.com, or they can search Good Gun Bad Guy on Amazon.
Very good, very good, and it's a wonderful read. I've read both of them, and I appreciate all the work that you've done, and just so many things that come out of the book, because the book deals obviously with the anti-gun argument, but really it can be applied to almost any anti-argument, because isn't it interesting? It's so funny that if you look at the Democrats and the Republicans, it's like when you were growing up and Mom always said no. But, if you wanted to go to the movie or go to the mall, if Mom said no, there was always that default, at least there was in my house, of going and getting my yes out of Dad. And it seems to me that the Democrats, they are the party of no. I mean, the only thing you can have is health care and their version of health care. But outside of that, as far as the rest of it, no guns, no wall, ain't gonna happen. And I'm so stunned by the ignorance of people that are willing to accept, this constant state of being denied life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and their fundamental constitutional God-given rights because we got Nancy Pelosi trying to run the country.
Well, that's the craziest part of the whole thing is that Democrats are willing to not only give up their rights, but to take the rights away from their fellow citizens. To me, it's an astonishing. On the surface, it's an astonishing thing, and you wonder how could they do that? Aren't they thinking about this? And like I said before, the truth is they've been so snowblind. They have really been manipulated. Their whole thought process on just about everything has been altered and changed and cultivated in a way that gets them to go along with anything a Democrat politician would say. So, I use the word brainwashing often, because I can't think of anything else. When you condition somebody like that to think a certain way, what else could it be? It is like a form of brainwashing on the left. And it's sad because I know people who are otherwise good people, but they just can't get out of their own way when it comes to the thought process. That liberal leftist ideology is locked right in. It's ingrained now in a lot of people, and
mm-hmm.
I think schooling has a lot to do with it too. We've had decades of this, and so now we have adults who have been completely transformed.
Well, what's interesting is that, I made mention earlier that on the Drudge Report, there's a picture, and it's the very first one, of Jussie Smollett wearing a T-shirt that says F Donald, and it doesn't just use the letter F, it says the word, but F Donald, and presumably because he is a homosexual man, okay? Does he know that 4 days ago, the President of the United States signed an international proclamation that all countries should decriminalize homosexuality? In a lot of countries, people don't realize this, a lot of countries, being gay is against the law. Quite frankly, it's how Apple Computer got their logo, because the guy that was the inspiration for that was gay, and he was chemically castrated after he was found to be gay. But I just don't know if people realize here on one hand, you got Jussie Smollett talking about how anti-gay Trump is, while simultaneously he's trying to legalize homosexuality worldwide and in the same week. I mean, how much of a DA? Well, then again, I mean, he paid 2 Nigerians to beat him up. So I guess he is just that ignorant. And I guess he is the poster child of what's wrong with this education system in this country.
Yeah, and the truth is this Smollett leftist dirtbag punk has no idea what Donald Trump just did. He doesn't know because he doesn't get that information. He gets the exact opposite information that, again, cultivates that ideology in him and causes him to go out and put his own life in danger by getting arrested because he is so strong in that anti-Trump, anti-conservative belief, because he's been trained. He's like a puppy. You can train a puppy to do just about anything if you reward him or scold him. And that's how we train our pets. And that's exactly what the media and Democrat politicians do to their voters.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I have a little golden doodle. And she is pretty well trained, and we worked with her a lot. And she, we as we went through the training process, we were having some issues of getting her. She would go outside and do her business, but it was hard to get her back inside. So we were talking. She wants to stay outside and run and do her thing, because at the end of the day, she's a dog, she's a puppy. But we got this bright idea. How about every time we call for her to come, if she responds to us immediately, we'll give her a treat, and it's just a little tiny little dog biscuit. And all of a sudden, it started to work. So we go out there, we call her by name, and she comes running in, and we give her a little dog treat. She'll sit down and wait for her treat. And then I started noticing something. She started going to the bathroom a lot more frequently.
Hey, there you go.
And so she'd go stand by the door, and it took me a couple of days to figure this out, but it's like she has figured out that if she responds to her name after going outside to go potty, she's going to get a treat for it. And I think in a lot of respects, Democrats are that way as well. The Democrat voters are as well. It's almost like they have been conditioned to do one thing, and then they project onto that for their other behaviors. And it's almost like once indoctrinated on this issue, indoctrinated on all issues.
Bingo. You just nailed it. That's exactly it. You can take the same strategies, the same leverage, the same strategies on people, and you can apply them to whatever strategies. That's like I always bring up the term causes. The left has causes. They have one strategy of manipulating the minds of people, but they apply that to all the different causes: racism, sexism, xenophobia, whatever their guns and all their causes, abortion. They apply the same brainwashing to all the causes.
Yeah, it's really pretty remarkable if you back up, and it almost creates this sense of, I don't want to say necessarily forgiveness. That's probably not the right word, but almost this sense of sadness from our perspective, looking at them and realizing that they really are just that misguided. That they really are that out of the loop of reality. That if you took every single gun off the street, for example, then all of a sudden, magically the human condition. Because at the end of the day, violence is a human condition. We are. And something else I think that we have a problem with is on the left. Now, there are Christians on the left, but a good portion of them are way secular or agnostic or downright atheist. You see more Christianity, or more faith anyway, Judeo-Christian values on the right than you do the left, even by their own reporting. I mean, you've had a lot of celebrities over the years that have espoused their own agnostic views. In a culture that is agnostic or secular or deist, even the concept of violence being a human condition is something that eludes or evades them. In other words, they don't understand that if you take the guns away, those
people
that are
will still
prone,
be violent.
They'll still be violent. That's exactly right.
Yeah. And people have proven to show that when they don't have access to a gun, they'll use other means. And let me just add one thing before I forget. You said that we sometimes look at them and we kind of feel sad for them. And it's true, because they've been so misled, and we're watching and we're going, oh my God, how can you people not see this? What's happening to you? But the truth is they're not sad, because they think they're doing the right thing. And the reason that they do is because I guess the biggest part of being brainwashed is not knowing you're brainwashed. Right.
No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. Well, we've only got about a few minutes.
That's baked into the pie.
So essentially what you're telling us, though, then Dan, is that there's really no point in us worrying about the argument, because, years and years and years ago, there's a Fox News host or a Fox News contributor that I know very well. And she's on with Hannity all the time, and she and I go way back. I mean, she used to live here in Birmingham, and she and I used to run the streets together. And the local listeners know who Dr. Gina Loudon is. And Gina and I've been to her home. She's been to mine. She was at my 50th birthday party. I mean, we have a long history. And, we used to run the streets all the time. And at one point in time, I was the morning host at a local radio station, and she was the evening host. And so because of that, in our relationship, a lot of people don't realize it, but I was even her supervisor for a period of time as well. Not that that's relevant, but it brought me in close proximity with her, and we'd have conversations all the time about our broadcasting and our broadcasting style. Gina had this thing that she really wanted to convince liberals that they were wrong. She wanted to change minds. She has a degree in psychology or something to that effect, or some kind of mental health programming. But she wanted to change the mind of liberals. And I used to say, Gina, the country's about 20% liberal. At least it was at this point in time. It's probably changed. The country's about 20% liberal and about 35% conservative, and the rest are in the middle. why don't you focus your efforts on motivating the conservatives? Because if the conservatives show up to vote, it doesn't matter what the liberals do. So we always have this back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, because my belief was, you're not going to change a liberal's mind because the evidence that they use to draw the conclusions that they use is faulty by nature. And so if their belief is predicated on an inaccuracy or a falsehood, how do you overcome that with the truth when they're already being convinced with a lie? And she and I would have these debates all the time, but I'm feeling something kind of similar in the gun debate. Do we need to worry about changing their minds, or do we need to focus more on what the politicians are doing and not saying? Because those that are it's like my sister, and I told you this before, my sister, who's a psychologist as well and from a big Ivy League school, once told me that I think the number she used was, she put this on Facebook, that 97% of gun-owning men, I have no idea where she got this number, but 97% of gun-owning men were apt to beat their wives. What? And I called her, I said, please, that's exactly what I asked her. All of a sudden the post disappears. And I'm like, don't play that with me. I'm almost 58 years old. I have never raised my hand to a woman, nor would I ever think it. And I don't even know anybody that has. I'm sure they're out there. But what is this relationship between gun ownership and hitting a woman? I mean, it's the most ludicrous stuff.
Right. Yeah, I know who Gina is. I like Gina. I think she's good. I'd actually like to talk to her about this stuff. But you're right about one thing. Well, you're right about everything you said. I agree with. And the difference with some of these people is, I always say, and I leave the door open for the people that can be helped. With the gun debate, I think there are a small portion of people who can be helped. And a lot of times what has to happen to help them is that they have to be in a situation where they're in danger, unfortunately, before they realize how important it is to defend yourself with a gun. On the other hand, I also say the ones we can't help, we must defeat. And that's exactly what you're talking about. We need to vote them out. Because a lot of them you can't argue with, and many of them will go their entire life without ever needing a gun. They'll get to the end of their life and say, see, I told you so. I don't need a gun. I never got violently attacked, so therefore nobody else needs a gun either. And it's the same people who put their seatbelt on when they get in the car, because they know that the possibility is there that you can get in a car accident, but somehow their brains are transformed to believe that they're never going to get attacked in a violent situation. So on one hand, like I said, I leave the door open for those who can be helped. I think there's a small percentage of them. I was one of them. I was in a situation where I realized how important gun ownership could have been in that moment. Now, I came from a different place, though. When I was a kid, I did shoot with my dad. He taught me about guns. My story is a little different because I went anti-gun. I went leftist for a little while in my life. But so some small portion can be helped. The majority need to be defeated.
Yeah, well, certainly good points indeed. Dan, before we part ways, first off, I appreciate you being so generous with your time this morning. Give us an idea where we can get a copy of the books. And I know that you do a lot of videos. I see all this stuff on your Facebook page. And so I want to get people to have as much information and as much access to you, as we can possibly give them. Because if nothing else, your viewpoints from the Second Amendment perspective are at the very least soothing. And what I mean by that is soothing to the gun owners out there that are very, very, very frustrated and thinking that, because that's something else the Democrats and the liberals can't seem to see, is if this particular right tumbles, it can potentially take all the other rights with it, because this is one of those that you got to bear in mind. It was the second bill, the second right, the Second Amendment to the Constitution. We're talking about something that was eminent, and it follows, the right to pray, the right to assemble, and the right to speak freely without complications from the government. And then, the Second Amendment is put in place to protect those very rights. And why people cannot see that is beyond me. But I also think that, we suffer from a condition where too many people in this country want government to run every aspect of their lives. And they want universal health care. They want to be told when to go to work, where to go to work, what to dress, what to do, what to drive.
Right.
They need that because they don't have any coping skills.
Right.
And so they definitely don't want other people out there because, there's something else in mind that's kind of interesting is that if everybody had guns or there was, more flexibility or leverage with guns, that's also a threat to those that would prefer government to be in charge because in their mind, we become their masters.
Bingo. Yeah, you just nailed it. And that's a big difference between the left and the right. They want that controlled environment because it feels safe to them. And it takes away any responsibility that they would have. Trip on the sidewalk, over your own 2 feet, you sue the business who happens to be there. That's the mentality of the victim. And they're in that victim mentality right now. They don't want us running around with all this freedom and guns and controlling our own lives. They don't want that because they need to be, like I said before, I've said this before, they don't want to control you as much as they want to be controlled. But they can't implement a government that will control them unless we're on board, and we won't get on board. And so that's just a point I wanted to make to that. But if we were to descend to into tyranny, we would be telling these leftists, "See, we told you so," but it'll be too late. So we can't let it get that far, and it's already getting pretty far as I can see. So we need to definitely defeat them. And help the ones we can, but not focus so much on that and focus more on winning. Just not for the sake of winning like they want to win, for the sake of our future generations. So I won't go on anymore, Michael. I know we've got to get going here, but thank you so much for your support because you've been a huge support of me and my books, and I really appreciate that. And so I appreciate it. But if people want to get my books, they can go to goodgunbadguy.net or goodgunbadguy.com.
And what about you said there's some YouTubes out there as well?
Yes, Good Gun Bad Guy YouTube page. I have tons of media where I talk about a lot of this stuff in depth, and I do these Dan Wos Destroys videos where I dissect and analyze the anti-gun debates on CNN and things like that. And people find that really interesting because I narrate and explain what's being used, what strategies are being used at that particular moment. So there's a lot of that. We have a new podcast called The Loaded Mic, which I co-host with my son Danny Wos Jr. and John Chiara. So that's a fun thing we're doing. So I'm doing a lot of stuff, a lot of speaking events and things, a lot of stuff coming up this summer. So I'd go to goodgunbadguy.net and you can get a lot of that, access to a lot of that stuff.
Excellent. Dan, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you joining us on such short notice. You always bring it, and you always are so informative and just logical. Just make a lot of sense. And I really wish a lot more people would be so, I don't know, just less fearful about the truth, about reality. We all come to our own realizations about what is truthful in the world when we are presented with a preponderance of evidence. I mean, that's the way logical, clear-thinking people think and process. And something else, you're a business owner, I'm a business owner. Sometimes you do things, you market things, you make business decisions that are ignorant or stupid, or they fail, and you learn from them, and you change your direction, and you come at it again. And that's the way successful people move forward with their lives. In the face of their failures or their shortcomings, they retool, change course, come at it again until they are successful. It seems like there's too many people in this country that just cannot understand that concept. And because everything, once they fail or they're fearful or whatever the case may be, they just throw their hands up and surrender. And I think that's what a lot has happened in this country with the gun debate is they are so fearful that they just throw their hands up and surrender and ask us to do the same thing and to surrender to government. And I'm so fearful of that, not just for me and you, but for them as well. And I appreciate all the hard work that people like you do.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Michael. I appreciate everything you do.
Well, I appreciate
it.
Absolutely. Couple weeks, Dan. Couple weeks, we'll get you back.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
All right. That's Dan Wos, everybody, author of Good Gun, Bad Guy, and Good Gun, Bad Guy #2. We're going to take a real quick one, come back on the other side, talk a little bit about reparations. Also, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee. Yeah, we got reparations and racism, and, well, you know, it's the same story, different day. But we'll break that down just in a little bit. You're listening to the Michael Hart Show right here on the Heart of America Talk Radio Network. We're coming right back.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, click that subscribe button down below and also the notification bell to keep updated on all my radio interviews, TV interviews, and the Dan Wos Destroys, where I analyze and tear apart the anti-gun media narrative. My books can be found at goodgunbadguy.net or goodgunbadguy.com. And don't forget, your Second Amendment, it's not a privilege, it's your right.